Hello, I'm Pastor Tim Holscher, and thank you for joining me. I have been looking in the book of Romans at how God stabilizes us as believers. I'm on a little bit of vacation, seeing my new grandson and helping. Uh, I'm not helping a whole lot. My wife's doing most of the helping over here at my daughter's place. But I wanted to take some time and share again the next verse here in Romans 12 and verse 15, where Paul is talking about how we as believers can contribute to um, the stabilization and maturity of believers. And in verse 15, he says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep." One of the things that happens in the life of the body of Christ, in the life of each individual member in the body of Christ, is there are going to be times for rejoicing and there are going to be times for weeping. There's going to be times of grief and times in which good things happen. And believers respond different ways. Sometimes believers get very excited when other people experience something good. But sometimes when people are experiencing something good and your life is kind of seems like the pits, it's real easy in that kind of a context for us to not want to rejoice with them and actually kind of begrudge them that why did this good thing happen to them, instead of rejoicing with them, looking at them as a member of the body of Christ and rejoicing with them. In the same way that sometimes when believers are going through a time of grief or sorrow and they weep, we don't want to have anything to do with them because, well, we have our own set of problems and we would just as soon avoid that. And so we don't want to be around their sorrow and their grief and their pain. But they're actually very key aspects of what it means to function in the body of Christ. And I think every one of us knows what it's like to have a part of your physical body that can be hurt, that can kind of affect your whole being. And so, as Paul reminds us here, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. He says something very similar over in 1 Corinthians 12, where he's also talking about the body of Christ. And he says, so that there should be no division in the body, but the members should have the same care for one another. Now he puts this in slightly different terms. And if one member suffers, so now you got a believer that's suffering, all the members suffer jointly. We have the word suffer here, and then we have this little prefix at the beginning here of the word suffer, which means to suffer together, jointly suffer, not just kind of sympathize. It's not sympathize with them. It's actually suffering. We actually get the word sympathy from another form of this word suffer put together like this. But you're actually going in and you're suffering together with them. You're actually, if they're obviously going through a physical ailment, you can't take on their physical ailment. But there are a lot of other forms of suffering that we can really share in, but we can share even as a physical ailment or a physical suffering by just being with them and not alienating them at that time. Similarly, it says, and if one member is, here the New American Standard has the word honored, it's the word glory or glorified. That is, their reputation in some area, in some matter, is recognized. And he says when that happens, we rejoice together. And he has this word rejoice that we had over there in Romans, prefixed again with this preposition. We prefix all the members rejoice together. We can't all share in the honor, but we can all rejoice in the fact, hey, great for you, this is great, rather than staying back and going, well, why you, not me? Now, if we go back to Romans 12 and just kind of put this together and think about this for just a moment, why would this be vital for believers being stable? Because sometimes believers that lack stability are going to be having some pain. They're going to be having some problems. They're going to be having some hardship and difficulty. And rather than standing aloof from them in that time, we can actually join to them. And that helps them in their stability. And we have a time in the history of religion that has affected the United States in which there were people that thought, well, if you're suffering, it must be that you have done something bad. Because these were people that were primarily living by the ethic of the law. And the ethic of the law taught that curses came for disobedience and blessings came for obedience. Go read Deuteronomy 28. But we're not under law. We are operating under God's grace. And God has not promised us material prosperity or material health or any of these things for obedience. And He's not promised us that we're going to suffer everything because we're disobedient. That's one of the things about grace, is that sometimes God is gracious with us, and when we would expect to be disciplined, we're not. And what happened in that particular society as they practiced that they had people that were suffering and going through hardship, and other people would distance themselves from those people because, well, obviously we don't want to help them. We don't want to share in that because obviously they've done something wrong in that regard. And I think maybe that's a good lesson for us, that this is what happens when we resort or turn to law, when we turn that direction, and it doesn't help believers become stable. Stable believers, they don't care. They'll rejoice with people regardless of what their circumstance is. They will weep with those who are weeping regardless of what their circumstance is, because functioning together in the body of Christ is more important for those people than is their own personal prosperity, their own personal circumstances. And that's a key aspect of stability. And it's something that you can do to encourage others in having a good day in the Lord. Thank you for joining me today.